Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the #1 source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter.
Hello, fine folks. This is Freedom Fighter, and welcome to Goldilocks Global Banking News. I am your host. Folks, today Goldilocks is sharing some invaluable information related to Vietnam. Are you holding Vietnamese dong? Are you waiting for the Vietnamese dong to RV? Have you diversified beyond the dinar, beyond whatever Zims and dragons and whatever else you may hold? Have you diversified? Or have you only invested in one particular currency or one particular alleged bond? Folks, if you have not diversified, you are not going to be able to benefit from the RV. I'm going to explain some information for you from Goldilocks today. Let's jump right into it. First, on Vietnam. The third round of negotiations will be starting soon, now that we are in the beginning of June. The third round of negotiations with the United States and Vietnam. This is where I am specifically asking for those who may have invested in the dong. The negotiations are focused on resolving outstanding issues and reaching a final agreement on a reciprocal trade deal. For those that have been following Goldilocks for quite some time, you understand the importance and the value of these tariff negotiations. For those of you who have been following and paying attention in the QFS Dialogues room and also the Saturday Night Dialogues call, you have been hearing member after member, story after story, meeting with banker after banker, discussing with our people how they, the bank, is preparing as a result of these tariff negotiations because what they do to the currencies. Goldilocks is sharing a more detailed look on these negotiations. The two sides between the U.S. and Vietnam have actively engaged in their two rounds, now going into the third round of negotiations to be announced shortly this month. Both sides are in progress of finding common ground. There's a focus on the agreement. The agreements aim to create mutually beneficial trade between the U.S. and Vietnam, addressing trade imbalances and reducing tariffs on each other's products. Folks, if you haven't heard, let me tell you for the first time that bankers have openly discussed with several of our members that they know the currencies will revalue as a result of the tariff negotiations. As a result of tariff negotiations. We still await to see the end of these tariffs and the negotiations. There's been clear progress made between the U.S. and Vietnam specifically, reporting that both sides have identified areas of consensus. Folks, no matter what currency you have, I don't care if it's dinar, if it's dong, if it's rupiah, if it's rupee, if it's real, no matter what currency you hold, every currency in the tariff negotiations in trade, and let me be more specific, every currency in trade is connected to every currency in trade. Why? Because these countries do trade amongst each other. And because they do trade amongst each other, their currencies now more than ever come into play because more countries are ditching the US dollar for trade and to utilize their own currencies for trade. Therefore, the demand in the global market for that country's currency, think of the currencies that you hold, those currencies go more in demand in the global market. So as they go more in demand, they become higher demand in the global market as a result of these tariff negotiations. Their values begin to fluctuate and move. Again, specifically between Vietnam and the U.S., they both are committed to continued dialogue and collaboration to foster a balanced and more sustainable trade relationship. Additional meetings are planned for the beginning of June. Both the U.S. Ambassador and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Vietnam's Trade Minister are working hand in hand along with both of their negotiation teams. Vietnam is actively pursuing trade liberalization, a process of reducing trade barriers and opening its economy, meaning opening Vietnam to global markets. As they open Vietnam to global markets, the Vietnamese dong will have more access to global markets, which means the dong will have more demand in the global markets, which means the dong's value goes up because the demand goes up in the global markets. Hence, the revaluation of the Vietnamese dong. Vietnam's shift to a market economy has involved market reforms, meaning laws and amendments that they have passed and continue to do so, which those laws go into effect July 1st. Vietnam has offered to reduce tariffs against the United States to zero. Yes. Did you know that the U.S. has tariffs that was put on them by Vietnam? Vietnam has always put tariffs on the United States, folks. You didn't know that. A part of the negotiations so far, Vietnam has agreed to reduce those tariffs, which 25-40% on the U.S., Vietnam has agreed to drop them to zero. So you see this back and forth negotiations? You thought maybe the 46% tariffs that Trump threatened Vietnam with was just it, when meanwhile, Vietnam has already had those tariffs on us for so long. Recent negotiations between U.S. and Vietnam is geared towards commitments to facilitate a market economy for Vietnam. Reciprocal trade negotiations, folks, particularly Trump's tariff policies on all of these different countries, even for the countries that you may have currencies and you don't hear their names in the media, they are affected. Because these tariffs have disrupted also the U.S. bond market. I know when you hear bonds, there's a trigger. No, not all bonds are created equal. The bonds that some of you may think are important to the RV, that you've been told about, I'm going to ask you to calm your mind and put those baby bonds to the side to pay attention to what I'm sharing. The U.S. bond market, these are U.S. bonds. They're beginning to sell off, meaning those bonds that are connected to the US dollar are losing their strength and power. Just like Goldilocks has been sharing, and just like our amazing member who had a bank appointment last week, it was shared with him. Sparkplug, or his banker, told him that they are aware of the tariffs and what is happening. And the weakening of the US dollar will lead to the revaluation of other currencies that will become stronger as a result of the US dollar becoming weaker. The US bond market, these are US bonds that are being sold off, are being affected by the tariffs. There's a shift happening right now. These dynamics have pressured the US dollar, with exchange rates reflecting reduced confidence in the US dollar in global trade. The 90-day tariff pause offers breathing room for negotiations, folks. That's all it is. So that all of these numbers in these negotiations can be ironed out. It also gives opportunity for which the stabilization of the bond market and exchange rates can be successful. Again, I gotta say it again, because I know there's at least one person listening to this that you have these so-called bonds that you got from eBay or wherever else that are called collectibles. And you are thinking that they have something to do with what I am referring to here. No, these are apples and oranges. Sugar versus sugar honey iced tea. Big difference. You got to realize that if you haven't diversified, you're going to be, well, depends on what you have invested in. If you have not invested into what is actually listed in the international banking system under the ISO 4217 list of currencies or quote unquote bonds, if it's not there, it's not going to be in the RV. It doesn't exist. The banking system doesn't recognize it, and it will not all of a sudden recognize it the day of the RV. Back to these trades, reciprocal trades. When negotiations conclude, new tariffs or new trade measures are typically implemented by individual countries. And their effects on exchange rates can then be observed and analyzed. Reciprocal tariffs, folks, are calculated by individual countries to address the imbalances of trade amongst each other. For example, with Vietnam, via their trade with the United States last year, Vietnam, $123 billion in surplus or $123 billion in profit with trading with the U.S., but the U.S. lost $123 billion or was $123 billion in a deficit. That is imbalanced. That needs to be addressed. And the addressing of that comes with these negotiations and the tariffs. Addressing of that comes with currency manipulation being addressed. What comes with that is these other countries that do trade with the U.S. that have been doing the same thing, and their currencies and their manipulation being addressed. All of this is ironed out through trade, through these tariff negotiations. What are the impacts on exchange rates? While new tariffs may affect exchange rates, it's not directly a result, for example, of World Trade Organization calculations. The impact on exchange rates depends on various factors, including the size and nature of the tariffs. Again, the impact on exchange rates depends on certain factors, including the size of the tariffs, the affected countries in itself, and the overall economic landscape. New trade measures, folks, can indirectly influence exchange rates through changes in the trade flows between countries. These impacts are observed and analyzed by economists and policymakers around the world. We are in June. Goldilocks is stating that June is the calm before the storm. For example, today, if you've been paying attention, the markets are looking for direction. Gold, silver, currencies, everything is looking for direction. These tariffs are creating a shift. Everyone is wondering what is going to happen when these tariffs go into play next month. The rush to gold has begun. Beautiful folks, stay grounded. Be intentional in your investment. Be of the mindset that everything you hear is not the truth. Be of the mindset that everything you hear is not the truth. Be of the mindset that you need to ask questions. And if you are somewhere where you are not able to ask questions, think of why. Think of why someone can tell you the RV is happening, but not provide you with any details, facts that you can vet yourself to prove it. You invested in this golden opportunity. Why leave your investment to chance to someone else? Goldilocks doesn't share anything without having the facts and receipts to back it up so that you can see for yourself. I understand many of you may not have the confidence in yourselves to believe that you have the wherewithal to understand what you might read. But I implore you to ask God for the discernment to speak to your heart, to help give you the answers you seek. And still, if that isn't enough, if that you may believe doesn't work, there are 8 steps that we provide in the Goldilocks QFS Dialogues room. You can try them out for yourself. You will have help along the way. You will be another example of another person that's prepared and ready for their blessing. We understand and know that not everyone is going to get and understand what we share. That's okay. There's no judgment. But if you look at this, it's like if you take 1 step towards God, He'll take 2 steps towards you. Why don't you take a step towards your investment to find out the facts? God will share and prepare you. Even half a step from God is more than enough you need. Click the link at the top of the description. Join the Goldilocks QFS Dialogues room. We'll be glad to help you along the way. Be well. Ciao.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the #1 source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter.